everybody, I'm making this video about how to use rate per 100 and ratio tables to find the percent of a number. So we're going to start by setting up our ratio tables and understanding where we can put numbers, because there's always 4 numbers in a ratio table that matter the most. The middleman we don't always need and use. So I want to focus primarily on these first and last 2 columns, where that's where the most information that we need in the end to go with. So when we set up our ratio table, we've always made a column for labels. So I'm just going to keep that going even though we don't have any real labels. We're going to represent this first row as our parts and then our second row as our wholes. And so when it comes to percent, we write percent, as we talked about yesterday. Percents can be written as a ratio per 100 because percent can be written as per 100. Okay, so in this case, and that looks really sloppy, but per 100 percent. So when we write percent as per 100, we automatically have a denominator of 100 every time we see a percent sign. So if I were to say 15%, I would automatically know that my part is 15 out of my whole, which would have been 100. So 15% written in ratio form so that we can solve a rate per 100. I like using this method because later next week we're going to be talking about percent problems where we're missing the whole instead of the per part. So if we're missing the whole, setting this up will be very easy because we'll already have 2 of our numbers. We just have to figure out where to put the part and the whole. Using methods just multiplying straight out or multiplying with the fraction over 100 is a great idea, but when we go into what we're doing next week, that's not going to work for us. So using the 6th grade standard of using rate per 100, this is how I'm going to implement it, and I do this by using the ratio over 100 along with the ratio of part to whole of whatever the problem says. So let's jump right in, and I'm doing on our worksheet numbers 9, 10, and 11 so that you can have some more guidance, and then you'll have to work on the rest of them on your own. So to start, I always start with my beautiful ratio table that I'm uber obsessed with. So setting up my ratio table, and remember that we have our label section, and it's very generic for right now, but what we do next week we'll need it. So we can generically put part and whole to represent that we're putting our part in our whole, part in our whole. This first part and whole is representing our percent. And so 0.44%, even though that's an insanely low percent and horrible, 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 we can represent it still as a percent, a rate per 100. And that's going to be 0.44%. The bottom number is always going to be the 100. Even though this is a crazy small number, a percent sign means per 100. So we're going to put the per 100 every single time. So when you see that percent sign, you should be super excited because it's giving you 2 numbers out of the 4 that we need. Over here, we need to figure out, are we going to put the 375 as the part or is it the whole? And the way that we figure that out is by thinking, okay, 375. I'm trying to figure out what 0.44% of 375 is. So if my word here was is, then I would put it with my 0.44, but it's not is, it's of. And so it's out of 375 possible, let's call it points, as if we're talking about a test. So 375 is our whole amount, because if I had gotten 100% of 375, it would have been 375. 100% would have been 375 out of 375. But we're doing 44 or 0.44%, so we need to figure out how much is that. It's going to be kind of small. How sad is that? So I need to figure out how to go from 100 to get to 375. The reason I'm going from 100 to 375 is because those are the 2 ends that I know. If I had known the top number, I would have gone from the top to the top, but I don't know the top number. The parts that I do know are the bottom two. So I need to think, how can I go from 100 to get to 375? And instantly 25 pops in my brain. Now, with a number on top like this, you're going to get another decimal when you divide. Like, it's just gonna happen. And sometimes I'm gonna use a good number, and sometimes I'm gonna realize it wasn't a good number. But what I notice is when I put 25 in here, and I think about how do I go from 100 to get to 25, and I know that that's going to be dividing by 4, because going from big to small we dividing by 4 because there's 4 quarters in a dollar. And you can do the math off to the side if you don't know that automatically. And I think about doing 0.44 divided by 4. It sounds pretty easy. And so if I set up my little division problem off to the side, and I say 0.44 divided by 4, because that's the order that we're saying it, we say, okay, shoot the decimal straight up. 4 goes into 0 0 times. It goes into 4 1 time. Bring down that 4. 4 goes into 4 1 time. We get that 0 remainder. Ding, ding, ding. We're done. And so 0.11 out of 25 is where I'm at. Now I need to finish my problem because I'm not there yet. So I'm going to need to go from 25 to get to 375. Again, if you don't know your multiples of 25 that high, and you don't want to count on your fingers, you could always do the division problem. So we've got 375 divided by 25. And so 25 goes into 3 0 times, 37, 25, sorry, 1 time, 25, and then drop down the 125. 25 goes into 125 5 times, and sure enough, we have our answer as 15. Ooh, all right, so out of 375 possible points, my answer is 15. So if I were to make a little line here to put my answer, 15 it is. Okay, now obviously if you're good to go, you can stop watching the video now, but if you're still not sure how to continue, that was an example of a decimal one with a crazy looking middleman. And here goes another one where we've got 15% of a big number. So setting this up, ratio table, 4 by 2. My labels for right now are just generic, part, and whole. I know my percent, because I'm so lucky, is going to be 15 out of 100. The other part is 620, and I have to figure out, is 620 going to be my whole or my percent? So is it telling me that the 15% is 620, or is it saying that I need to find out how much the 15% is? It is asking me how much the percent is. If I were to say what is 100% of 620, all of it would be 620. All right. So 100% is 620, and then I'm trying to figure out what 15% is. So now I need to figure out how do I go from 100 to get to 620. It's not going to be an easy transition. I need a middleman. Now, since my top number is smaller, I want to try and think of a bigger number, as big as possible, maybe the greatest common factor to use between 100 and 620. I'm instantly thinking 20 would be the way to go. 50 isn't going to work. So 20. So if I'm doing that, I have to say, okay, how do I go from 100 to get to 20? I'm going to divide by 5. Well, I got lucky because dividing 15 by 5 is very easy mental math. Now I have to say, well, that's great. How do I go from 20 to get to 620? So you might, again, have to do a little division problem off to the side, or use your fingers and toes to skip count by 20s. 20 goes into 6 0 times. It goes into 62 3 times. We get a remainder, and then we've got a 1. So 31 times. Oops, sorry. 31 times. And the reason I said times 31 is because I'm going from small to big, and that's multiplication. What I do at the bottom, I do at the top. So I'm going to have to do 3 times 31, and that's 93. Now, if you want to, you could pause the video and do 11 on your own, and then start the video back up to see if you got the same answer as me. And if you don't, then you'll obviously want to pay attention step by step what I go through. setting up my ratio table, because I'm telling you right now, we're working in ratio world. We've got part and whole. I'm just going to abbreviate because I'm lazy. And I know my percent is going to be 250 per cent per 100. Memorize it. Really lock that in. So 250 out of 100, or per 100, is my percent. And I've got my 24. 24 is my whole, because I want to know what 250% is of 24, not is. If it said is, I'd say, oh, 250% was 24. But it's not. It's of 24. So that tells me it's out of 24. So that's going to be my whole amount. Again, I have to figure out how to go from 100 to get to 24. So I have to start thinking of my greatest common factors, or maybe my multiples. Let's see. So we've got 4 would be a good one. 20's not going to work. 10's not going to work. I think 4 might be the way to go. So if I use 4 as my middleman, I would say, okay, how do I get from 100 to get to 4? That's going to be divide by 25. When I do the bottom, we do the top, divide by 25, and we get 10. Now I'm going to go from 4 to get to 24. Remember, I'm using the bottom numbers to find my middleman, because if I have one to get to another, that's where my work can be done. Otherwise, I don't know what to do to the top. So 4 goes to 24 by timesing it by 6. And what I do the bottom, I do to the top. And 60 is my answer. So on my line, my answer would be 60 for this one. On my line, 93 would be my answer. And remember that it's not percent. Their answer should not have a percent sign, because I'm not saying 15%. And I'm not saying 250% of 24 is 60%. It doesn't even make sense. I'm already giving you a percent. I need to know how many out of that. Now I got more than 24 because my percent on that test was 250%. Anytime it's over 100, your number is going to be bigger than the bottom number. So it's super exciting stuff. So 60 out of 24 to get a 250%, 15 out of 375 to get a 0.44%, and 93 out of 620 to get a 15%. And kind of always plug them back in to make sure they make sense. Obviously, if my number here was like 930, because I did something weird with a decimal, 930 out of 620 would never make 15%. Obviously, it should be a smaller amount in comparison to 620, because I didn't even get a 50%. So it's going to be way less than half. All right, guys, so that's the example from the worksheet that was given today in class 9, 10, and 11. And just going back to review how to set up our ratio table. I hope that this helped. I know that this is a very hard concept, so using the ratio per 100, even though it seems complicated right now, and not something that your parents probably learned how to do. Remember that we're going to need this next week when we are looking for the whole number. So deal with this part, and then we'll get to the other one, and it'll all make sense and come together. All right, thank you guys. Have a great day. Bye. See you in school.